Imagine, just for a moment, that you're sitting in a dark room.
Maybe you have like a single lamp on.
Yeah, exactly. And outside, you can hear the rain against the glass. It's rhythmic. It's safe.
It's comforting, honestly.
Right. Because caught in the storm on land, you can just sit by a window, sip a warm drink, and watch the downpour with something close to pleasure.
Because you're protected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I want you to take that feeling of safety and, well, completely strip it away. I want you to imagine that exact same rain, but you aren't in a room. You are on the open water.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
4,000 years ago,
Yeah.
in the pitch black of night. Because, as our sources today tell us, rain at sea is never alone.
No, it definitely isn't. It arrives with the wind.
Right. And together they are this terrifying machine designed to just dismantle human confidence.
It is a completely different reality. I mean, there is no glass to protect you, no solid ground beneath your feet.
So true. We're taking a deep dive today into a specific chapter of source material titled Chasing Death, Episode 45, Waters of Trial.
And our mission here isn't just to recap a story of survival, right?
We're exploring a deeply atmospheric, almost cinematic text, one that wrestles with a massive philosophical question.
Which is basically, who or what actually holds the power in our lives? Is it nature? Is it the cruelty of other people? Or is it, something entirely unseen?
That question of agency, of who is really in control, is what makes this text so gripping. Because the author sets up this grand illusion of human agency only to systematically tear it down.
They really do, piece by piece.
Yeah. And to understand how they do that, we have to look at the physical reality of the setting. The text opens in the Sea of Fars during the monsoon months.
Which is notoriously brutal.
It is. I looked into the historical records for maritime trade during this era, and what struck me is that these ships were not the floating steel fortresses we think of today.
Oh, not even close.
They didn't have watertight bulkheads. They were basically slender wooden baskets stitched together with rope and hope.
Literally rope and hope.
Yeah. So, expert, how did a crew physically survive a monsoon in what amounts to a fragile wooden shell?
Well, it actually comes down to a really counterintuitive bit of engineering.
Oh, how so?
Think of a modern skyscraper, right? It's built to sway in the wind to disperse the kinetic energy.
Right, otherwise it would just snap.
Exactly. If it were completely rigid, an earthquake or gale force wind would snap it in half. These ancient ships had to do the exact same thing on the water.
So they were flexible.
Yes. If the wood was too thick and unyielding, the massive, unhurried walls of dark water described in the text would shatter the hull instantly. They survived because they were built to flex.
Which means the sailors felt every single terrifying contortion of the wood beneath their feet.
Every groan of the timber.
The text gives us this visceral picture of a passenger named Zayn standing on the tilting, wet deck, feeling dizzy as the ship pitches helplessly.
It's pitching so violently because it has to. That's the design.
But that raises a massive question for me. If they knew the physics of these boats, and they knew the monsoon season was a death trap, why risk it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Was it just pure economic desperation?
It was a calculated risk, mostly dictated by the winds. I mean, in ancient maritime commerce, you either sailed with the seasonal monsoon winds, or you sat in port and didn't trade for 6 months.
Wow. So it's just the brutal reality of their economy.
Exactly. But the text uses this natural desperation to really highlight the psychological toll of absolute helplessness.
Because they can't fight the ocean?
No. Wave after wave floods the deck. The sailors aren't just holding on to the rigging, they are frantically bailing with heavy wooden buckets.
They were literally trying to pour the sea back into the sea before the weight of the water drags them under.
It's the ultimate fight for control against an entirely indifferent universe.
And while we're watching these men fight for their lives against the elements, the text is quietly setting up a parallel narrative.
About a completely different kind of powerlessness.
Yes. Because later in this chapter, we are introduced to a young woman named Asha.
Yeah, the author weaves this brilliant, tragic juxtaposition here.
It's so striking.
While the sailors in the Sea of Fars are battling the raw forces of nature, Asha is in North Africa, entirely stripped of her agency by the cruelty of men.
She is kidnapped from the desert by bandits, right?
Right. And sold into a brutal overland slave trade, eventually ending up in a city called Yarmouk.
We'll get deep into Asha's reality in a bit, but I want to keep her in the back of your mind, listener.
Yeah, her situation is crucial for the overall theme.
Because her total lack of power frames everything that happens next on the water. Back on the ship, The storm reaches its absolute peak.
The wind actually tears the canvas sails.
It's chaos. With a splintering crack, one of the heavy wooden yards holding the mast just gives way and crashes down.
And the crew is just scrambling in the dark to haul it back into place.
Through it all, the captain holds his ground at the helm. He's fighting the wheel with his entire body until dawn finally breaks and the sea settles.
The storm passes, and the captain just drops onto a wooden plank and falls into an exhausted sleep.
I can't even imagine that level of fatigue.
They survive the night, they spend the next day mending sails, and by late afternoon, the ocean is a vast, silent calm.
It's eerie almost.
It is. But here's where the author explores the psychology of survival. Surviving the elements almost always lulls humans into a false sense of security.
Right, it's like the collective memory wipe of humanity.
Exactly.
The sun comes out, and we immediately forget the trauma. The captain even says we should count ourselves fortunate that God showed us mercy last night.
And the next morning, he brings a large idol of a buffalo deity right onto the deck to perform rites of thanksgiving.
They are deep in devotion. They feel totally in control again.
Which is the perfect atmospheric setup for the sudden, violent intrusion of reality.
The contrast is jarring.
Right. The sailors are chanting, the water is glassy and calm, and then a tiny dark speck appears on the far edge of the horizon.
You really have to appreciate the dark humor of this specific moment, though.
Oh, absolutely.
The captain is so relaxed, so completely trusting of his stone buffalo, that he just opens one eye, squints at the speck, assumes it's a lost merchant ship, and closes his eye to keep praying.
He's just totally unbothered.
Until the speck gets closer, and the sails become clear. It's moving way too fast.
You can almost feel the blood drain from his face as the realization hits.
He whispers at first, then he just screams it across the deck. Pirates.
The transition from peace to utter panic is instantaneous.
The captain is barking orders. Cover the valuable cargo with straw. Draw whatever swords they have. Turn the ship hard west.
But we have to look at the naval tactics of the era here.
Right, because it's not a fair fight.
Not at all. The pirate ship is significantly smaller and lighter because it isn't weighed down by heavy trade goods.
It's built for speed.
Purely for interception and agility. It reads the merchant ship's clumsy maneuver instantly and closes the gap with a speed the heavy vessel simply cannot outrun.
What I find fascinating here is the clash of two completely different realities.
The merchants versus the raiders?
Exactly. On one side, you have these merchant sailors. The text explicitly notes that these are decent men of commerce. The sea lanes are their office, not a battlefield.
They don't actually know how to wield a sword properly. They are just pretending to be dangerous.
And on the other side, you have men who are schooled entirely in violence.
The text paints this terrifying visual, right? Hard-looking men with black cloth wound tightly around their heads, standing at the prow of their agile ship.
Naked swords in their hands.
Just waiting to leap. They won't even hesitate. They load their onboard catapults and launch massive stones that smash into the merchant ship's deck.
Splintering those flexible wooden boards we talked about earlier.
The violent reality wins instantly.
Put yourself in the captain's shoes for a second. You've just survived a deadly monsoon. You're literally in the middle of thanking your God for saving your life, and then howling raiders swarm your deck.
The psychological whiplash is unimaginable.
The peaceful crew is cut down in minutes. The captain is hauled to the mast and lashed to the wood with thick rope.
It's the ultimate nightmare scenario. The storm didn't kill them, but their fellow man is about to.
And just when the narrative seems to seal the fate of the merchant crew, it pivots.
Because before the pirates can finish looting, one of them spots someone crouching behind a stack of bales.
It's the passenger we mentioned earlier, Zayn.
They drag Zayn out and throw him on the blood-stained deck in front of the pirate chief.
Now, surrounded by carnage, by the men who just butchered the crew, Zayn is completely bizarrely calm.
The chief mocks him for hiding like a coward.
And Zayn just looks him dead in the eye, utterly expressionless, and says, "If you have the power to kill me, then go ahead."
It is a staggering moment of defiance.
Truly.
But it isn't just false bravado. It is a declaration of absolute certainty. Zayn tells this towering, blood-soaked pirate chief that his own arrogance has led him straight to this ship for his destruction.
Zayn actually demands blood money for every dead merchant sailor. Or, he promises, the chief and his entire vessel will be reduced to ash before they reach the horizon.
Which naturally brings a stunned silence over the ship.
Even the bound captain is terrified for him. You can see the pirate chief's face cycling through the emotions, confusion, then fury, and finally this cold, murderous blankness.
He raises his heavy iron sword high above his head, and brings it down with every ounce of strength he possesses.
aiming directly at Zayn's neck.
And this is exactly where the text shifts genres.
Yes. The pacing slows down to a crawl. The heavy blade comes down.
But instead of the horrific sound of flesh parting, there is a sharp, deafening metallic ring.
The sound of steel meeting solid stone.
Think about the physics of that for a second. The kinetic shockwave of an iron sword hitting an unyielding surface at full force would travel right back up the chief's arm.
He's probably completely disoriented.
Oh, absolutely.
But you really have to appreciate the sheer stubborn commitment of this pirate chief. His sword snaps cleanly in two on a man's bare neck, and instead of taking the hint that he's outmatched,
He just grabs another sword.
he grabs another sword from a crewman. It's the ultimate "this is fine" meme, but with piracy. He just starts slashing wildly, a complete frenzy of blows across Zayn's body.
The author notes that an ordinary man would have been rendered completely unrecognizable in seconds.
But Zayn stands perfectly still.
Unmoved. He doesn't even flinch. And when the chief finally stops, panting and exhausted, there is not a single mark on Zayn's skin. Not a scratch.
What strikes me about this genre shift is how it completely upends the stakes for the listener.
It really does.
We spend the first act worrying about physics, wind, wood, water displacement, tactical speed, and suddenly we are dealing with metaphysics.
We've crossed the boundary into the supernatural.
How does this shift alter our understanding of the story's theme?
It forces us to reevaluate what power actually is. Up until this moment, power was physical force, the weight of the ocean, the sharpness of a sword.
Tangible things.
Right. But when the chief exhausts himself against Zayn's unbreakable skin, an entirely different quality of silence falls over the ship.
It's the silence of awe.
Everyone is staring at a reality they have absolutely no category for. The stakes have officially shifted from human survival to divine retribution.
Zayn calmly reaches out, plucks a sword from the trembling hand of a pirate who is too stunned to resist, and turns back to the chief.
He says, "You have struck me many times. Let us see if you can endure even one."
But he doesn't swing the sword.
No, he simply speaks the name of the Almighty and tosses the heavy blade upward into the open air.
And it disobeys gravity. It does not fall. It hangs suspended above the deck.
And then divine fire erupts from the metal. Sheets of roaring, blinding lightning pour downward.
In a fraction of a second, the pirates standing nearest are consumed exactly where they stand, turned to ash.
It's an incredibly cinematic climax.
The surviving pirates don't even hesitate. They just throw themselves into the ocean.
And the arrogant pirate chief, whose entire violent worldview just shattered into a million pieces, drops to his knees.
He presses his forehead to the splintered wood, weeping and begging for mercy.
Zayn, retaining his terrifying composure, simply repeats his demand. "Pay blood money for every sailor your men have killed."
At his gesture, the burning sword slowly descends and settles harmlessly onto the deck. He demands 10 large sacks of gold coins.
The pirates frantically swim back to their ship, retrieve the heavy sacks of gold, lay them at Zayn's feet, and flee over the horizon.
And then we get this deeply quiet aftermath. Zayn walks over and unties the captain from the mast.
As soon as the ropes fall away, the captain drops to his knees and tries to worship Zayn as a living god.
Which brings us to the profound theological core of the text.
Zayn stops him instantly. He pulls the captain up and says, "I am no deity. I am a man just as you are. The only difference is that the Almighty has made certain promises to me, and he is keeping them."
The captain is stunned. Zayn tells him to divide the 10 sacks of gold.
When the captain asks if Zayn won't even take one pouch for himself, Zayn refuses.
He says, "I have no use for gold. To me it is dust. What would I do with it?"
He orders 5 sacks for the surviving crew, and the other 5 set aside for the widows and children of the men who were killed.
I think Zayn's rejection of the gold is as significant as his rejection of godhood.
It shows an absolute, perfected detachment from the material world. When the surviving sailors try to bow to him, he redirects their reverence entirely toward the great entity, the Almighty Lord.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit. Is it really humility?
What do you mean?
I mean, if you are literally bulletproof and you can summon apocalyptic lightning from the sky on command, gold is just shiny metal. It is incredibly easy to be detached from the material world when you aren't bound by its physical laws.
That is a very fair critique. It's a completely different hierarchy of needs.
Exactly.
But historically speaking, when humans are granted absolute power, It usually corrupts them, absolutely. The fact that Zayn doesn't immediately set himself up as a wealthy god king is arguably the actual moral miracle here.
That's a good point. He uses the moment to pivot the crew's worldview instead.
Right. The captain asks what this Almighty looks like, where its idol can be found, and Zayn explains that the Almighty has no idol.
He is infinitely greater than any carved image. He is everywhere at once, seeing all things, hearing every whispered word, and intimately knowing the hidden chambers of the human heart.
The psychological difference between a localized, tangible god and an omnipresent one is huge for these sailors.
The crew realizes that their stone buffalo deity, something they could see and touch, sat completely silent while their brothers were slaughtered.
As Zayn points out, hurl an idol against the deck and it shatters.
The crew universally converts to this terrifyingly abstract but fiercely protective creator right there on the blood-stained wood.
It's a massive moment of revelation. But what the author does next is structurally brilliant.
Because after this staggering display of divine power, the narrative violently pulls us back to the mundane.
Yes, a thin, dark line appears on the horizon, growing into the green crowns of trees. They have reached the coast of Sind.
Zayn casually mentions he's heading to a place called Mohenjo-Daro and asks for passage back later. He seamlessly folds himself back into the rhythm of ordinary human travel.
They step off the ship into a rough, cone-shaped mud brick port. And immediately we are reminded that while Zayn commands fire from the heavens, the human world is still intensely petty.
So petty. Tax collectors and customs officials are digging through everyone's belongings. A guard stops Zayn and demands to search him.
Zayn politely says he carries nothing but his clothes and a few coins.
But the guard decides to exercise his tiny fraction of worldly power. He grabs Zayn by the collar, shakes him roughly, and sneers.
And here we see an incredibly subtle, controlled display of Zayn's agency, a stark contrast to the roaring lightning on the ship.
Zayn doesn't raise his voice. He simply places his left hand against the soldier's neck.
Instantly, the man convulses, crumples to the dirt floor, and lies completely still.
And Zayn just straightens his collar and walks past the fallen guard into a bustling marketplace full of vendors selling fresh watermelons and clay toys.
He secures a spot on a midnight caravan and moves on.
It's a quiet reminder of his untouchable nature.
But just as we feel a sense of closure with Zayn walking into the market, the narrative violently pulls us across the world.
In the exact same span of days, we cross the seas back to the rugged, dry shores of North Africa.
And the tone of the text shifts completely, becomes heavy, melancholic.
This is where we return to Asha, the young woman we mentioned earlier. We are in the city of Yarmouk.
She has been sold to a wealthy slave trader named Kashem, a man whose entire fortune is built on human suffering.
He brings Asha to a large, imposing mansion just outside the city walls.
And inside this mansion is a household of women from distant lands who have suffered the exact same fate.
Torn from their families by raiders, treated as cargo in a brutish overland commerce.
The author describes them as a grief-stricken sisterhood. Over time, these women have reached an agonizing psychological plateau.
They know the desert around them is vast and unforgiving. Escape is mathematically impossible.
They believe fate has permanently fixed their circumstances, so they simply endure. They are patient, quietly sad, and they look after one another.
When Asha arrives, something stirs in that mansion. It's a new face, a fresh tragedy, but alongside the deep sorrow, there's this bittersweet comfort.
They pull her into their melancholy world because it's the only warmth they have left.
And this is a thematic genius of the author. We have to look at these two narratives side by side.
Exactly. If we synthesize these threads, this entire chapter is a masterclass on the extremes of agency.
We watch the terrifying, indifferent power of the monsoon. We saw the sudden, selfish cruelty of the pirate ambush.
And standing in the middle of it all, we have a stark contrast between two human beings. You have Zayn, a man who possesses reality-bending agency.
He has unbreakable skin, the ability to summon divine fire, the power to bypass the petty cruelty of a guard with a single touch.
And then you have Asha and the sisterhood of women in Yarmouk, people who have been violently stripped of all agency.
Trapped not by nature, but by the systemic, calculated cruelty of men.
They have no magical swords. No lightning comes to save them from the slave trader.
The text forces us to hold both of these realities at once. It tells us that the world is vast enough and complex enough to contain both miraculous, physics-defying deliverances and inescapable, suffocating mansions of grief simultaneously.
It really makes you consider how fragile our own illusions of control are, how quickly the scales of power tip.
One moment you are praying to a stone idol, thinking the worst is over. The next, you are tied to a mast facing a pirate's blade.
One moment you are an authoritative guard shaking down a traveler, the next you are paralyzed on a dirt floor.
We all think we're the captains of our own ships until the wind changes.
It is a profound, unsettling meditation on human vulnerability.
It really is. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over in the dark. Picture that rain outside your window again. Listen to the storm. Zayn walked off that ship completely untouchable, a man who bends the laws of nature and commands fire from the sky to avenge innocent sailors.
He is the ultimate power fantasy.
But across the world, Ashi is entirely bound by the cruelty of men, trapped in a mansion with no escape and no rescuer. If the almighty Zayn spoke of truly watches both shores, knowing the hidden chambers of every human heart, why does divine lightning strike to save the sailors of Fars, while the women of Yarmuk are left to find comfort only in each other's sorrow?